the traits of the sires. Yeah, it can make a difference. I have forgiven horses that might not have the biggest, prettiest walk because they were in the mischief, because I knew they had the heart.
So you talk about being the mischief, and when he started out, I guess what 12.5 might have been his stud fee, and it was more so the sprinter type. And now we've seen him getting bred to different horses, different classic type mares, and he's starting to throw these classic horses. Does a sprinter walk totally different than a horse that's going to run a mile and a quarter? I mean, how are you when you're looking at a horse? I mean, to me, a sprinter's going to have more of it's a tighter walk.
Agreed.
So like, how much will you knock a horse for, God, doesn't have the greatest walk, but I believe he's going to be a sprinter? Does that come into play?
When I'm buying horses, I want a fast-looking horse that can go 2 turns. That's where we really get paid. But you're right. Sprinters have a little bit more of a typier walk. When I see a big, long, loose walk, I'm thinking long and slow normally. I'm not thinking fast. So that has a lot to do with the walk. You're right.
So you hear people talk, and I love listening to interviews of people who have good horses, they're around good horses, and they talk about class. What exactly, does it show that early on in the yearling? If you're prepping a yearling, does the class show early on?
Well, I think it does. Now, obviously, I hadn't prepped as many yearlings as I have 2-year-old, but class, a horse with a lot of class will show you that immediately. They're smarter. They want to do what you want them to do, and they just have a presence about them.
Okay, and people talk about the eye of a horse. Oh, he has a kind eye. What is that? Explain that.
I'm not sure that the eye has a whole lot to do with it. I think it's more the overall horse. He has a kind eye, but he's just a kind horse.
So we talked about the feeding, the shoeing, the prepping. How important is it to have the right show person when you're at a yearling sale for somebody to show a horse? Does that have anything to do with how the horse is set up, how the horse walks?
Oh, I think it has a lot to do with it. Matter of fact, my wife and I, fortunate enough we've been working sales long enough that we have a group of top class salespeople that help us at the sales. But if you don't present your horse properly, those guys are going through there trying to look at as many horses as they can. And you got to make a good impression. And if you've got some bozo holding your horse that's not presenting him properly or setting him up and showing him to that person, and it doesn't make a good impression, the guy's not going to come back and look at your horse again. But if he sets him up and presents him well, he'll come back and he'll put him on his short list. And that's what you're trying to do, is get on everybody's short list. And a show person has a lot to do with that.
What about when the horses are leading up to the ring? Mm-hmm. Are you one that likes to stand in the back ring and watch them when they kind of get out the stall, and I guess you can say it's getting closer to game time, so to speak? Are you one to like to see how they act in the back ring? And if a horse has a meltdown and starts sweating and is kind of frantic, does that take you off a horse?
I think yes. Matter of fact, if a horse doesn't look better in the back ring than he did at the barn, he's not going to show it for me when I'm going to try to resell him. So yeah, I think that has a lot to do with how they handle themselves in the back. Will tell you what kind of temperament they have, because the next step when you go to a paddock, it's going to be a lot different. So they've got to show that they have some sense that can handle themselves well.
So to buy a yearling, it's done. Let's say we buy them in September. Let's just use September 15th. You're going to sell them now. You're a pinhooker. So a pinhooker, they buy yearlings and or weanlings, but in this case, we're going to talk about yearling to 2-year-old. What's the next step? Does the horse get turned out some? Are you starting to kind of strategically say, okay, he's born on this date, I want to possibly go to this sale. What's the next step? Do you wait 30, 60, 90 days to start breaking them? What do you prefer? What do you think's the best avenue that might work for you?
In my career, we started around 1st of September breaking yearlings, even when I was a quarter horse guy. That was just the weather starts getting better. It's just the time to start breaking them. Even a small horse, I've heard people say, well, let's wait, it's too small. I disagree. I think giving them 90 days of breaking, that 90 days, you're giving them something to grow from. You're building a foundation to grow from. Then you can turn them out if they're young. Give them a couple of months out, but give them something to grow from. So yeah, I'm a big believer in putting 90 days in and then assessing what you have. You want to sell them early, sell them late, then you can go from there.
And that's exactly, is that your process? Do you kind of break them? And how long, when you start to, let's say, break them for a 2-year-old in training sale, how long before you're going to have a rider on their back and they're going to go out on the track? How long does that take? From the time you get them in from the yearling sale, they're in your barn?
Actually, yeah. I've been doing this a long time. We've kind of got our system, but usually after a couple of days, about 3 days, we've got a rider on their back, ride them in the stall, ride them in the barn, going to the round pen. But usually the first week, they're jogging on the racetrack.
And then they're gonna jog. What's the process there? Jog for how long? Then start to kind of gallop. What's the process there?
We like to jog them for about a week, get them used to things, kind of build them up a little bit, and then we'll start turning around and galloping. Maybe not a long way, but galloping them a little bit.
And you like to go in pairs or in threes?
I do. The more the better. At least 3.
And then when will you? Because you kind of, I've always heard people talk about introducing a little bit of a faster gallop, or I don't want to necessarily say speed work, to kind of stress some of the bones and help bone growth and remodeling and things of that nature. When does that aspect kind of start for you, or should I say, what's the general consensus in the pinhooking world?
I really don't know what the consensus is, but I know our program, we spend the first 30 days, get them rope, get them used to the track, build them up to a good gallop. The second 30 days is putting miles on them, putting a lot of miles on them. And then the third 30 days, we like to start 2-minute licking them a little bit to do what you're talking about, stress the bones, the cannon bones, and stress parts of their body that need stressing, so they will harden bone. And
so if you're starting to do that, and you know the majority of them are doing. What if you have one that's just sour, that's not liking it, that's just not enjoying it? Do you start over? Do you just keep on, or do you just say, I'm gonna?
That's the horse that needs to be turned out for 30 days or 60 days and reset his mind. So then you can probably start back over.
So after you finish this, 30 days, then 30 more with 30 days of kind of getting the initial phase of having a rider on their back and jogging, then 30 more days of miles, and then, the little 2-minute licks. Then, at that point, if we're talking mid-September, you're looking, we're in December at that point. I mean, when do you start? Is that when you start to plan what sale I might go to? Because they'll start in March.
Yes.
2-year-old training sales start in March, then obviously April, then you'll have some in May, and then they'll finish up in June. So that's when you're going to start to assess where you're going to go with those horses?
Yes, at the end of that 90 days, the first 90 days, then depending on their age, maturity, and what they're showing you, then you start making out your plan about which sale you're.
Will you continue on, or will some get stopped on or kicked out?
I always like to give them a little break, but the horses that are going to March, if you start the 1st of September and they're going to March, that means in February they got to be working pretty fast. So that means in January they're going to have to be breezing. So there's not a lot of time to freshen. No.
And then as you kind of get going, it's just you're just going to kind of pick and choose what sale you're going to go to, and you just hone in on those sales. I guess
we try to put them in the sale where we think they'll bring the most money. You want to be in the top 10% of any sale you're in. Sometimes you can't find a sale where you can be in the top 10%, but that's what you're trying to do. We usually go to the March sale. That's where we take our older, more mature horses. And then our final big sale is in May. And that's where horses need a little more time. We aim them for that. So.
And with those sales, so certainly I think more so the March sale, you'll see probably more horses work an eighth of a mile. Mm-hmm. You'll get some work a quarter, but not a ton. April, you'll get a little bit more, and then certainly as it goes on. Are you a eighth of a mile worker? Do you like working a quarter? What's your preference?
Now, that's interesting. Our business at the 2-year-old sales, the gallop outs become so important. So I used to like to work them a quarter, 3/8 even. But now then at the gallop out, you've got another 3/8 that if you're going to work a quarter, they're actually going to be clocking you 5/8. And that's a little rough on babies as far as I'm concerned. So the way we try to do it is we're working 3/8 but from the 8th roll. So we're trying to work a fast 1/8 of a mile and gallop out 3/8.
And whenever you're kind of getting ready or leading up, so you've been based out of Louisiana for the past decade or so, and now you'll be moving to Highlander in Sulphur Springs, Texas. When you're going to go to OBS, or when you're going to go to Timonium, when will you leave? How early before a sale will you leave? What's the process there?
Well,
like you see these race horses that are going to be running in the Haskell this weekend, they're going to ship right on top of the race and things like that. Are you going to ship right on top of the breeze show, or are you going to ship before that?
because these are young horses and because they're need to get used to the place they're going to breeze, because you just got one time to breeze. You don't want them looking around. You don't want them seeing things for the first time or second time. You want them to feel comfortable. So we try to get there a week out and spend a couple of days just letting them look around, jogging them, let them see everything. Normally, where you're at, you don't have a grandstand, but you'll have a grandstand at these 2-year-old sales. So that's another thing they got to get used to. So we try to get there a week ahead of time before the breeze, spend a couple of days just letting them get familiar with the place, and then we'll tease them a little bit over the track to let them feel it, especially like at OBS. It's a synthetic track. They've never seen anything like it. So just let them have a feel over that. And then you got to freshen back up for the time to build.
Can you thank you so much. We did have some trouble experiencing audio difficulties, so I've been recording. And if we would just do a brief recap, like weanlings, yearlings, and a little prep, maybe a little bit of a 5-minute recap, I think that would be awesome.
You got it. So we're going to start with the weanling. If you're going to weanling prep is going to be the least intensive, I guess you could say. If you're going to get something ready to sell, and usually that's later in the fall, early winter, how early will you start with the weanlings to kind of get them ready?
Oh, I think a couple of months probably on the weaning, and mainly you're trying to just gentle them down to where they're easy to show off. They know how to walk, they know how to present themselves. They just got to be handled quite a bit.
And what about when you're starting to prep for the yearlings? I know you mentioned you like to start 90 days out. Do you take spring x-rays? When do you take spring x-rays to kind of see, to make sure you're not dealing with something and you're surprised at a yearling sale?
I think spring x-rays are very important. They normally do it when a baby's a year old, calendar year old. If they're going to have OCDs or cysts or stuff, that's when they show up. They might not show up earlier as a weanling, but they'll show up then. So that's usually.
And that gives you enough time in case there's a cleanup procedure involved.
If it's something that you need to clean up real quick, then you can still make the yearling sales.
What about, are you a person that you prefer hand walking to get a yearling ready for a sale? Do you prefer a Eurosizer? What's your kind of choice?
We do both. I use a Eurosizer to exercise the horse, but hand walking is very important because they've got to show that they've got a good mind, they know how to set up, and they know how to walk. So,
will you go both ways on the Eurosizer? Will you turn it out and make them walk the other way?
I don't. I know a lot of people that do, but I don't think it's that big a deal myself.
And what about like bits? Do you start putting a chiffony bit in the mouth, or do you put,
I think just being able to handle the horse is the important part. A lot of people use the chiffony bit. Personally, I hate them because they play with them too much. We actually start out with just to teach them. We start out with a lip chain, and then we'll slide it into just their mouth, so it's just like a bed. But all that's not to scold them, that's not to abuse them, that is to just have a little control.
And what about feeding? Does the feeding and the nutrition increase? How many times a day do you feed? Does it increase as it gets closer to the yearling sale? What exactly?
All of that depends on the horse. If he needs his weight cut a little bit, needs more exercise, less feed, you just got to monitor. I think a horse that's too fat is unattractive, and a horse that's too thin might be a bad doer. So you've got to watch and just depends on the horse how he's doing.
When you see a yearling at a yearling sale and they're all dappled out, how do you achieve that?
Good horsemanship, good feed, good worming program, and good grooms rubbing on normally. If a horse is dappled, it just means they're good and healthy, they're happy, they're healthy, things aren't bothering them. So yeah, you like to see that.
What about getting a horse? When do you start introducing a farrier and getting shoes put on the horse and corrective shoeing if you need for a yearling sale? How early do you start on that?
I think you start on that pretty young when they're first weaned. You need to start making sure their feet are going in the right, proper direction. That all starts at a pretty early age. You need a good farrier.
And shoes on a yearling. How early before a sale will you start to put shoes on?
I like it about 60 days out, so you can start fitting the foot to the shoe, you know, because a lot of times they've got their feet are broke off, anyway, so the second shoe, before you go to the sale, you have the foot looking as good as possible.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jake and Al. Really appreciate you.
Hopefully we touched on a few different topics. I know we had some audio issues, not audio, so maybe video issues, but we hit a little bit on the weanling, we hit a little bit on the, a little bit more on the yearlings, and then we hit on the 2-year-olds, which you like to kind of say that's your wheelhouse, I guess you could say
I don't
right
know if
now.
it's my wheelhouse, it's where we're making our living at, yeah.
Well, I appreciate everybody who maybe tried to ask a question. I know there was some audio, some difficulties. I tried to come up with as many as possible. I'd like to think we might have answered some of the questions. So appreciate everyone listening, and I enjoyed doing it. My first webinar, so now I'm a seasoned veteran at a webinar. I know you've done many of these in your life, so you kind of gave me some comfort. But once again, on behalf of the Louisiana Thoroughbred Breeders Association, I'm Jake Delhomme, member of the LTBA, Al Pike. We thank everybody for listening, and hopefully somebody can learn a little something about how much we truly love the race horses and we truly take care of them. Thank you.